All right, everybody, we are back again with another rod bending here at Omnia Fishing at our headquarters in Golden Valley, Minnesota. And this one is by customer request, A-rigs. This one, I gotta admit, isn't my strength for me. I do throw an A-rig. I live in Minnesota. We're one of the states you can only throw one hook on the whole rig, so we have a specific rig we throw, the Minnesota rig. Obviously, you can throw any A-rig with just one hook on it, but Hog Farmer makes us a Minnesota rig. I do throw it a lot in the fall. Not a lot, I should say, but a little bit in the fall. I have thrown an A-rig down south when I've traveled. I've thrown it up in Canada even. So I know a little bit about A-rigs, but I'm one of those guys that slaps it on a flipping stick and goes if I have to throw an A-rig. There are specific rods for A-rigs though. And I also think that this would be a good conversation to have about versatile rods that will work for an A-rig too if you're not always fishing an A-rig. If you're an angler that has a dedicated A-rig rod, we'd love to hear from you what makes it a great A-rig rod. Not just like, hey, this rod's a great A-rig rod, but what makes a great A-rig rod? I have my own opinions on that. We'll talk about that as we bend them on the wall, but we're gonna start it off with a new rod that has actually gotten a little bit of feedback we've gotten that this is a great A-rig rod. And this is the 7.9 heavy regular bend, so moderate action, 7.9 heavy Zillion rod from Daiwa here. This thing came in at 5.8 ounces. I'm gonna tell you, that's pretty light when you look at these rods that are really, really big and designed for throwing big swim baits, A-rigs, or punching mats. And that's why this one came in to me. This was definitely more of a rod that I viewed as kind of a jack of all trades, big line rod. And I'm not saying big bait rod because I think this would make a killer like mat punching rod, which is something, at least where I live, I only do that a lot in the late summer months and fall months where I'm punching thick vegetation, thick mats. Where you live in the country, that could differ completely. That's something they do all the time in Florida or lots of other places, the Cal Delta and things like that. But that would make this rod, to me, have more purposes than just being a dedicated A-rig rod. So I did like the idea of that one here. What makes it interesting to me is that the handle's a little short. When you're throwing a big bait like an A-rig or a swim bait, I do get why you a lot of times want to two-hand it back at the back of the handle, and this handle is by far the shortest one of the bunch for a big bait. That could be something though, we're pointing this one out because of that exact feature. It has the power to throw an A-rig, certainly does for big line and a big rig, but it's got a short handle. So if you're in the market or you're somebody that despises long handles, you want more length in that blank out there in front of the rod and not have it back here in the handle, this is the rod for you. It did come in, like I said, at 5.9 ounces. Does feel a touch tip heavy. It is not super balanced. And I have a decent size reel on here, nothing giant. If you had a real swim bait reel on here, or a big A-rig reel on here, like a 300 to Tula or a big Tranks or something like that, I do think it'd balance out nicer. It does not feel real heavy by any means, just a little bit more on the tip heavy side, but really good rod for an A-rig, at least on paper. Let's go bend it on the wall and see what we think. All right, we're back with that 7.9 heavy Zillion rod. We're gonna bend it up, and I'll tell you what, it may bend sort of mod fast here on the wall like that, but it feels faster than that. I mean, if I just load it up a little bit, it's definitely wanting to do it way out there towards the tip a little bit more. I know I was saying it earlier on this one to me screams like big flipping stick, even a mat frog rod, like if you're throwing frogs way back in a mat and you're running big line. I think I said it earlier, this isn't big bait rod to me, it's big line rod to me. And if there's any techniques where you're gonna fish 65 pound plus braid or 20 plus pound fluorocarbon for every 25 pound, big game, Berkeley big game, 25 pound or 22 pound or whatever it is, this is a great rod for that. And honestly, it doesn't feel tip heavy when I'm bending it like this. It's actually got a lot of power. The handle's just short, so it's a little odd. It feels like a really big rod, and then you look back here and the handle's like kind of short, and that's nice and easy to fish around. So if you got big clothes on in the winter, that kind of stuff, if you like shorter handle rods, I'm gonna tell you right now, this is a rod you need to look at for adding to your arsenal if you want a big line rod that does not have a really long handle. Actually, the more I bend this one, the more I like this one. Be completely honest, when I picked it up, didn't feel it was very awe-inspiring. line on it on the wall, this is a cool rod. You need to check out the Zillion 7.9 heavy regular bend if you're looking for a big line rod. Okay, here's another one. This one is from a buddy of ours, John Cruz. This is his big bait rod in the Cashin lineup. So the John Cruz Signature Series rods, this is his big bait rod. This is a 710 medium heavy moderate fast, mod fast, not moderate, mod fast. 710. This thing came in at 5 ounces, and let me tell you something, it feels really light, especially with a reel on it. This thing, I have a hyper mag on it here. It's just a personal reel of mine, and I'm going to tell you, I know it's a light reel, but it should make the rod feel tip heavy, right? It does not at all. If you put a bigger reel on this thing, you would not feel the front end of this rod. This thing feels super light. So if you're in the market to just, he calls it a big bait rod, for a glide slash, you know, big boot tail line through bait, swim baits like I like to throw, or a rig rod, this thing is awesome. I'm really a big fan. Picking them all up, this was a big surprise to me. I expected to feel a lot of weight in the handle. The Cashins tend to feel like they balance them out with some counterweights in the butts. This thing feels just super lightweight. It's an unsanded blank and it feels just alive. So if you're looking for a super sensitive lightweight A-rig rod, here you go. Let's go bend the Cashin big bait rod from John Cruz. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but the weight on this sucker was 5 ounces flat, which for a 710 is pretty impressive. Let's go bend this thing. All right, here I am with that Cashin big bait rod. I know I mentioned the weight twice now. Kip pointed out that I did say it twice, but I'm gonna say it again. 5 ounces on this thing. And it is, I would say, definitely more moderate than the Zillion rod was. It feels more moderate to me than mod fast. No. If I just, you know, like I talk about a lot on here, if I'm imparting action on it, or I'm just doing, you know, working the bait or anything like that, or actually probably even casting a lighter bait, not something super heavy, I can see where they get mod fast out of it, 100%. But when you load it up, it's obviously moderate. But yeah, it's more mod fast. Honestly, now that I play with it a bunch more, it is starting to lean more towards mod fast to me. But 5 ounces on this thing, that's pretty impressive. It just doesn't, it feels like a big bait rod. The handle's longer, like I was pointing out the previous rod here. I have confidence I could tie something real big on this thing and throw it. And for an A-rig, you know, the A-rig fishing I've done, when I've done it like all day long. That's just, to me, the time of year or the place for an A-rig is when you're committing to throwing that big umbrella rig out there and dragging the chandelier all over the whole lake trying to get bites, bigger bites. This thing is kind of inspiring for that specific purpose. It feels like a rod that would actually be fun to deal with, just lob casting that thing all day long. And that's what you're doing a lot, right? You're not really side arming and roll casting. Like I tend to roll cast a lot. Even when I'm throwing distance, a lot of times I'll snap and roll my wrist and fire a bait off pretty far. You can't do that with an A-rig, right? I'm doing a lot more lobbing, and this thing feels like it's designed for that exact purpose and to be fun while doing it. So if you are in the market for an A-rig rod that is lightweight and feels great and would make kind of A-rig fishing a little bit more fun, so far I'm really, really impressed with, for a dedicated A-rig rod, this thing, the 710 Cashin John Cruz Signature Series big bait rod. All right, feels like it wouldn't be a rod bend technique-wise if we didn't throw one of these in there, right? This one here is a Shimano X-Bride 7.7 heavy mod fast. Handle seems a bit shorter than the other long rods we grabbed for this A-rigs, but it's not as short as the previous, one of the previous ones. It doesn't feel really super long though, but it does kind of meet in the middle. It's not super short. I still think I'd grab it if I was lob casting all day long. No big surprise. I guess it shouldn't be a big surprise, even though I want it to be a big surprise, but these things always seem to come in with impressive stats when you pick them up. This thing's 7'7" and a heavy power with a mod fast action, and it came in at 4.8 ounces. That's impressive. Under 5 ounces, and this thing, once again, this goes back to similar to what I said with the first rod in this series. I could do a whole bunch of stuff with this thing. I could throw frogs on big mats. I could throw glides with it. Any type of swim bait I wanted to throw with this thing, you could get away with, absolutely. And obviously the A-rig that we're talking about today. There's a lot of stuff you could do with this thing. I could even just see flipping a regular Texas rig. If you run a big weight, why not? This thing feels great. Very impressive, as always. The X-Bride family seems to show a lot of value for what they are. I'm gonna go bend this thing on the wall. Let's see how this Shimano X-Bride in a 7.7 heavy, moderate, fast does. All right, I'm here with that Shimano X-Bride, and like always, this series of rods just impresses, and it does. This 7'7" feels longer than that standing here looking at it because the handle's not super long. I would say it's an in-betweener. It's long, it's past my, well, it's to my elbow, I should say, but it's not up in my forearm. I think you can two-hand cast with this. Man, Shimano nails those actions a lot of times with this. It's mod fast is what it is. It almost feels like a fast action, but if I really lean into it, or I think if I had something real heavy on to throw, it would load up. This would be a great A-rig rod for this guy. As I stated before, I'm not someone who's gonna probably have a dedicated A-rig rod in my boat. It's a seasonal thing for me or a destination fishery type thing for me. So I would love to have a rod that I could just tie him on when I stop doing something else. But man, this thing, I mean, the weight of it's incredible, 4.8 ounces, and it has the action and certainly has the power for an A-rig. All day long fishing with an A-rig, I think dedicated so far, that big bait rod from Cashin seems like it would be pretty well suited for more of exactly what I'm saying with a big bait, which I'm gonna lump A-rigs into the big baits. Obviously you can get little A-rigs now, but I'm talking about a general umbrella rig. I would think this thing would be perfect for that, but really no bigger than that, honestly. It definitely, of the bunch so far, seems to have the least amount of power. I have to point that out. As much as this thing's getting a glowing review, in my opinion, because it's incredibly well priced for what you're buying here, and what you can do with this thing, it is on the lighter power side of the bunch. So if you are somebody who's throwing like massive chandeliers instead of just a typical A-rig, or you want to double it up for a big bait rod or big line rod like I was talking about before, this one's a little bit more on the, like, you know, saying that it's a heavy power, it feels more like a medium heavy to me than the other ones. So that being said, super cool rod here. I'd be a proud owner of a 7.7 medium heavy, moderate or heavy power, moderate fast X-Bride here. Cool rod from Shimano. All right, I got a curveball for you on this one. I didn't even know what this was when I went over to pick it up. This is the Genko Savant series of rods. This is their A-rig rod, and this thing is 7.9 medium heavy. The blank says fast action. Our site said mod fast, so I'll talk to Joe, our digital merchandiser, and find out where he got that action from. So we're diving into that. No kidding. This thing feels 100% weightless above the handle, like absolutely weightless. They balance this thing absolutely perfect. So the bigger handle obviously does help, you know, that they have like a, it's not wind grip, but it's similar to that texture of wind grip. It's like that soft, you know, wind grip feeling material on it. And it feels like, it's exactly what you'd want it to feel like if you picked it up, if you saw this thing on a shelf. It's weightless above the handle here, so you're gonna know what's going on out there at the end of a really long cast. It does seem to load up really well. I'm interested to see if this thing is actually fast action and see what the power's like, because in a medium heavy, that means a lot of things, right? In a big rod like this, it could be super stout and heavier than a typical bass rod, but we'll find out. I also got a weight on it, but I forgot what it was, so I'll get it to you over here in a second when I get on the wall. All right, here I am with that Genko Savant rod, and this is a 7.9 medium heavy. It did come in, I got the weight, 6.2 ounces, which I'm not even kidding you, surprised me. Even though I know the game, I've picked up a lot of musky rods, big rods that feel really light because they're so well balanced, counterbalanced in the rear of the rod back here with these big handles. This thing feels weightless. I mean, even holding it like this, it feels weightless. This thing's really, really nice. It is insanely moderate. As I bend it here, it's a lot more moderate than even the other rods that I picked up. It feels like the tip is all of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guides down, 7, 8 guides down. It's honestly the most moderate feeling of the bunch, because it may look like it. It's not as, it feels more powerful than the X-Bride. I know it doesn't look like it as I do this, but I'm having to really kind of torque on this thing to get it to bend. And the tip's not going, the whole end of that rod's going. So it's more of a mod fast, like we have it listed on our site. So maybe Joe was bending the rods before he did the actions on there. But it feels more like a mod fast to me, or a moderate action rod. It has a little bit more power than that X-Bride had on it. So once again, it'd be a perfect A-rig rod if you like, you know, for lobbing. It's going to load up and it'll lob that bait out there quite a ways. You're going to want to run some stiff line on it to get to drive home those big hooks, because it is a bit soft. It is. I actually give them the ratings correct. I mean, bending it, I was like, man, it felt a little stouter, I guess, in hand, I'm saying. On the wall like this, with some stout line on it, some big line on it, you could absolutely set the hook far away with it. Everything's got the length and the power for that, but it's not as powerful as a couple of the rods, a little bit more powerful than the Shimano rod. Would be a joy to fish. Would be an absolute joy to fish if it was a dedicated A-rig. I look at this as more of a specialty rod, technique specific rod for your bigger baits. So if you're looking for an A-rig rod to lock in your hand to be an A-rig rod, or a big bait rod that is really lightweight out in front, it's going to be this rod so far. It's really nice. I guess I give the nod that so far that Cashin rod's still on the top of my list because of how incredibly light it felt, and it's obviously over an ounce lighter than this one. But this thing feels really nice too. If you're looking for a dedicated big bait rod, look at these Genko Savant rods for sure. All right, we couldn't wrap this one out without one of these, because this would be our most popular umbrella rig rod we sell here. I bet you a bunch of you aren't surprised about that. That is a Dobyns Champion XP in their swim bait series. This one's literally called Small Swim Baits and Umbrella Rigs. It's an umbrella rig rod. It's listed as a fast action medium, and I'll tell you right now, obviously they bump their powers up, I think, in this series, because it certainly doesn't feel like a medium. It feels like it's got a lot of power, and it feels really fast. Fast action, that is, when I just bend it in hand here. We'll go bend it over there on the wall. We did get a weight on this thing. I believe it was 6.2 ounces. 6.4 ounces, I apologize. 6.4 ounces I got shouted at. Sorry, I get confused after a while. 6.4 ounces officially. So it's a little bit on the heavier side, but these longer handles do make it feel a lot more balanced. This is quite balanced. We have a light little older Hyper Mag on here, and it feels pretty balanced, to be honest with you. I'm gonna go hook it up on the line wall here and see how it bends. All right, we're here with the Dobyns Champion XP umbrella rig rod. This is small swim bait or umbrella rig rod. Obviously, the power and actions and stuff are adjusted for this classification of rods, because this is rated as a medium, but man, it's got more power than some of the other rods that I bent for sure. I would call it in the middle of the pack as far as power, and this one's rated as a medium. Everything else was at least a medium heavy, if not a heavy, but this thing's got plenty of power for an A-rig for sure. This thing came in at 6.4 ounces, like I said, so it was the heaviest one of the bunch, but I'll tell you what, it doesn't feel that heavy. And that's obviously, as I talked about the other rods, due to the fact that we have a nice big giant counterbalanced handle back here to get you the balance you desire. I think this would even feel better, to be honest with you, with a bigger reel, which this is a lightweight magnet. This is not an A-rig reel, although I have thrown an A-rig on it, to be honest with you. This is not an A-rig reel. It's not dedicated for it, but this would be a joy to fish with. Once again, this falls into the category of a dedicated A-rig rod. So if you are an angler that fishes somewhere, if you live in a state where it's legal to throw one, and I mean an official one with like 3 hooks or 4 hooks or 5 hooks or unlimited hooks, I would own one of these then. Where I live, we can throw the 1 hook, like I said, so I kind of just try to use the flipping sticks for it, but this is a lot nicer than the flipping sticks I use. They do call it fast action. It does slow down on this wall quite a bit from when you're bending it in hand, so I'm going to give it, honestly, a mod fast feel to it to me. It's a lot more mod fast to me than it is fast, but it's not super slow. It looks slower than it is. It's actually I'd lean towards Mod Fast on this one. So very impressive rod from Dobyns, as always. You guys always point that out a lot of times to us, whether it's on our site or on YouTube or anywhere we put these. We hear about, try the Dobyns, try the Dobyns. This is a winner here. I have no qualms with this being called exactly what it is, and I think if you're a dedicated swim bait angler and A-rig angler, that this is a rod you definitely need to take a look at. Like I said, it's a bit on the heavier side than the rest of the bunch, but it does not feel like it when, and I'll bet you that pays off for you in probably durability too over the long term if you're throwing bigger stuff on it and big lines. So if you're looking for a dedicated A-rig rod, I'd throw this in the lump for dedicated A-rig rods. Big fan and big surprise of this one has been probably that cashin rod, but I put this one, this was an impressive one as well. Really kind of blown away with that Jenko rod, but they all kind of had their purposes. So hope this was informative to you. Please, if you're an actual expert A-rig angler, not like this guy, give us some feedback on what you're looking for in an A-rig rod. I can certainly point out the actions and all that stuff, but it'd be nice to hear from somebody that's really, really successful with A-rigs all year round, what you kind of look for in your A-rig rods and what brands and what models. So thanks for tuning in. We'll bend some more rods for you next time.